A professional wrestler, confident his sheer size and ring reputation could overpower a royal guard, attempted a dramatic body slam in the castle courtyard. But one lightning-fast move from the guard turned the entire scene upside down, leaving the wrestler sprawled on the stones and the crowd absolutely speechless. Here's how it happened. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel because tomorrow at the same time, we'll bring you another story of courage and discipline from the Royal Guards that you won't want to miss. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle's ancient stones as Marcus the Mountain. Morrison's massive frame filled the courtyard entrance. At 6'8" and 300 pounds of sculpted muscle, he moved with the dangerous grace of a professional wrestler who'd made his fortune breaking opponents in rings across the globe. "Look at this place," Marcus sneered, his voice carrying the same aggressive edge he used to intimidate opponents before matches. "Bunch of old rocks and guys playing soldier." His expensive tracksuit, adorned with his personal brand logo, seemed out of place against the castle's timeless dignity. Behind him, his personal trainer and two other members of his entourage exchanged nervous glances. They'd seen that look in his eyes before, the one that usually preceded someone getting hurt. The trainer, Dave, stepped forward cautiously. "Marcus, maybe we should stick to the regular tourist areas." "Regular tourist areas?" Marcus cut him off with a dismissive wave of his hand that could have swatted aside a lightweight boxer. "I go where I want, when I want. That's what being a 7-time heavyweight champion means." His championship ring caught the sunlight as he gestured, its diamonds worth more than most people's yearly salary. A young mother pulled her children back as Marcus shouldered past, his bulk casting a shadow over their camera as they tried to take photos. The children's eyes widened with a mix of fear and recognition. They'd seen him on television, throwing men around like rag dolls, breaking bones and spirits with equal indifference. "You see that guy?" Marcus pointed toward the Queen's Guard, standing at attention nearby, his voice carrying the same tone he used for pre-match intimidation. "That's what happens when you can't make it in real combat sports. You dress up and play pretend." A group of elderly tourists muttered disapprovingly, but Marcus's size alone deterred any direct confrontation. His reputation preceded him. The man who'd been banned from 3 wrestling promotions for taking things too far, for turning choreographed combat into real violence. "Boss," Dave tried again, "the palace has strict rules about—" "Rules?" Marcus's laugh was as harsh as his finishing move. "Rules are for people who can't break them." He rolled his shoulders, the movement rippling through muscles honed by decades of professional violence. His eyes fixed on the guard with predatory focus, seeing not a dedicated serviceman, but another potential victim for his particular brand of entertainment. A pair of veterans near the palace wall recognized the intent in Marcus's bearing. They'd seen that look before, in places where violence wasn't choreographed or contained by ring ropes. One touched his service medals unconsciously, his weathered face setting into grim lines as he watched the wrestler approach the guard's post with deliberate menace. Marcus stalked toward the guard post with the same measured pace he used to approach a downed opponent in the ring. Guard James Harrison stood motionless, his scarlet uniform a stark contrast against the castle's weathered stones. At 32, Harrison was no stranger to confrontation. 2 tours in Afghanistan had taught him to recognize genuine threats beneath any facade. "Hey, costume boy," Marcus called out, deliberately positioning himself within the guard's personal space. "I've got a question about your little act here." His massive frame cast a shadow across Harrison's immaculate uniform, but the guard's eyes remained fixed forward, his posture perfect despite the looming presence before him. The veterans edged closer, their military experience telling them this was more than the usual tourist harassment. They recognized something in Marcus's stance, the coiled tension of someone looking for an excuse to strike. "You know who I am?" Marcus circled Harrison slowly, his voice carrying across the courtyard. I've broken men twice your size in rings across the world. Real fighters, not toy soldiers playing dress-up. He flexed his hands, the knuckles cracking audibly, a sound that usually preceded violence in his professional bouts. Dave, his trainer, hung back with the entourage, their faces showing the resigned worry of men who'd seen this pattern before. "Come on, boss," he called out weakly. "We've got that meeting at—" "Shut it," Marcus snapped, never taking his eyes off Harrison. "I want to see what they teach these guards about real combat." His emphasis on the word guards dripped with contempt. Bet it's not much, standing around all day like mannequins. The afternoon crowd had begun to thin, parents hurrying their children away from the palpable tension. Those who remained watched with a mixture of concern and morbid fascination as the massive wrestler continued his intimidation attempt. Harrison remained motionless, but there was a subtle change in his bearing, imperceptible to most, but clear to the watching veterans. The slight adjustment of his grip on his rifle, the barely noticeable shift in his stance, these were the preparations of a combat veteran recognizing an imminent threat. "Look at him," Marcus announced to the remaining onlookers, his voice carrying the theatrical projection he'd perfected in arenas worldwide. "Not even man enough to look me in the eye. This is what they call a soldier?" He leaned in closer, his breath hot against Harrison's cheek. "Where I come from, we call this target practice." The older of the two veterans took a step forward, his campaign medals catching the light. "Son," he began, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd seen real combat, "you might want to reconsider." "Might want to what?" Marcus spun toward the veteran, his massive frame tensing. "You got something to say about how I handle myself, old-timer?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. "Just suggesting you learn about who you're dealing with," the veteran replied calmly, nodding toward Harrison. "That uniform isn't a costume, and this isn't a wrestling ring." Marcus's laugh was ugly, devoid of humor. "No, it's not a ring. There's no referee here to save him, is there?" He turned back to Harrison, cracking his neck, another pre-fight ritual that had preceded many of his most brutal matches. "Maybe it's time someone taught you toy soldiers what real fighting looks like." The remaining tourists backed away further, creating an unconscious circle of space around the escalating situation. The sun had dipped lower, casting Marcus's shadow long across the courtyard stones, a dark prelude to what was about to unfold. "Tell me something," Marcus moved closer to Harrison, using his height to full intimidating effect. "Under that fancy hat and all those shiny buttons, are you even a real man? Or just another puppet playing pretend?" His massive shoulders blocked out the sun as he deliberately invaded the guard's space, close enough that his chest nearly touched Harrison's rifle. The veterans exchanged knowing glances. They'd seen Harrison in Afghanistan years ago, watched him lead a squad through 3 days of heavy fighting to extract wounded civilians. The discipline he displayed now wasn't weakness. It was the contained power of a warrior who didn't need to prove anything. "I've broken Olympic wrestlers," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Snapped arms like twigs in front of thousands, but you just stand there, don't you?" He reached out, his fingers hovering inches from Harrison's collar. "Makes me wonder what would happen if someone decided to test all this discipline." Dave made one last attempt from the sidelines. "Boss, remember what happened in Munich?" "Munich?" Marcus barked a harsh laugh. "You mean when that security expert tried to stop me? Spent 6 weeks in traction, didn't he?" His eyes never left Harrison's face, searching for any crack in the guard's composure. "At least he fought back. This one's probably too scared to even blink." Harrison remained motionless, but there was a subtle change in the air around him, like the pressure drop before a storm. His eyes, still fixed forward, held the same calculating focus he'd worn during close-quarter combat in Helmand Province. Every muscle was ready, prepared, waiting. You want to know what real power looks like? Marcus began rolling up his sleeves, revealing forearms thick with corded muscle and scar tissue. It's not standing still and taking orders. It's about domination, control. He slapped his own chest, the sound echoing off the castle walls. It's about being able to break anyone, anywhere, anytime. The older veteran stepped forward again, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Last warning, son. You're crossing a line you can't uncross. A line? Marcus spun again, his patience visibly fraying. The only lines I see are the ones these toy soldiers walk, back and forth, like good little puppets. He turned back to Harrison, his massive frame trembling with barely contained violence. But what happens when someone cuts the strings? The remaining tourists had backed away to what they hoped was a safe distance, their phones lowered, forgotten in the tension of the moment. Even Marcus's entourage had retreated several steps, recognizing the signs of their boss losing control. I'll tell you what really bothers me, Marcus continued, beginning to bounce slightly on his toes, a pre-fight ritual that had preceded some of his most violent matches. It's that you probably think you're better than me, standing here with your medals and your traditions. He spat the last word like a curse. But in the real world, in actual combat, you wouldn't last 30 seconds. Harrison's grip on his rifle adjusted minutely, a movement so slight most wouldn't notice, but to the veterans watching, it spoke volumes. They recognized the subtle shift in balance, the almost imperceptible tensing of muscles. This wasn't the nervous reaction of someone intimidated. It was the calculated preparation of a combat veteran reading his opponent. Maybe it's time for a demonstration, Marcus announced, his voice carrying the same threatening edge he used to terrify opponents before a match. Show everyone here what happens when your precious discipline meets real strength. He began circling Harrison again, each step bringing him closer, like a predator tightening its loop around prey. The sun dipped behind a cloud, casting the courtyard in sudden shadow. In that moment of dimmed light, something changed in Marcus's bearing, the last threads of restraint visibly snapping. His hands clenched into fists the size of small hams, his shoulders bunching with lethal intent. "Time to wake up, soldier boy," he growled, the words barely audible above his own heartbeat. "Let's see how well that uniform protects you from reality." "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus's voice boomed across the courtyard with practiced showmanship, his arms spread wide like he was addressing a packed arena. "You're about to witness something special. The moment someone finally exposes these guards for what they really are." The setting sun painted the castle walls in deep amber, casting harsh shadows that seemed to emphasize the wrestler's massive frame. He'd removed his tracksuit jacket now, his sleeveless shirt revealing arms thick as tree trunks, each muscle defined by years of violence, both choreographed and real. "See, in my world," Marcus continued, rolling his shoulders in anticipation, "we separate the real warriors from the pretenders. And what I'm looking at," he gestured contemptuously at Harrison, "that's the definition of pretend." The veteran with the medal stepped forward one last time. "Son, that man's not what you think. I served with him in—" "Served with him?" Marcus cut him off with a dismissive wave. "Let me tell you about service. I've served up broken bones in every major arena worldwide, made champions quit, made tough guys cry, sent would-be heroes out on stretchers." His voice dropped to a menacing growl. "That's real service." Harrison remained motionless, but his stillness had taken on a different quality, like a drawn bow at full tension, waiting for release. His eyes, still fixed forward, held the focus of a man who'd faced worse threats in darker places than this sunlit courtyard. "You know what your problem is?" Marcus moved closer, his shadow completely engulfing Harrison now. "You've bought into your own hype. Think standing still makes you strong. Think that uniform makes you special. He cracked his knuckles, the sound sharp as gunshots in the tense atmosphere. Time for a reality check. Dave made one final, desperate attempt from the sidelines. Boss, remember what your lawyer said about public incidents? Shut it! Marcus roared, his patience finally shattering. I'm tired of this circus act, tired of watching these frauds parade around playing soldier while real fighters like me do the actual work. He turned back to Harrison, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Time to show everyone what happens when the act meets reality. The remaining tourists had pressed themselves against the courtyard walls, creating a makeshift arena. The veterans stood their ground, their faces set in grim lines, as they watched Marcus begin the same warm-up routine that had preceded some of his most brutal matches. Let me paint you a picture, Marcus announced, bouncing on the balls of his feet now. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to grab this toy soldier, going to lift him up, uniform, rifle, stupid hat and all, and introduce him to gravity. He mimed the motion, his massive arms flexing. They call it the mountain drop. Usually ends careers. Harrison's breathing remained steady, measured. Years of combat experience had taught him to read opponents, not just their movements, but their intentions. Every subtle shift in Marcus's stance, every twitch of muscle, told a story of impending violence. The best part, Marcus continued, his voice taking on the same tone he used for pre-match interviews. When I'm done, when he's lying there trying to remember his own name, everyone here will finally understand something. He gestured at the gathered crowd. All this whole guard routine, it's just an act, and I'm about to close the show. The sun emerged from behind the clouds, catching Harrison's medals earned not in staged combat, but in the brutal reality of war. For a fraction of a second, their gleam seemed to catch Marcus's eye, making him hesitate, but then his face hardened, any hint of doubt replaced by pure aggressive intent. Last chance, soldier boy, Marcus growled, moving into his starting position. Walk away now. Admit it's all pretend, and maybe I let you keep your dignity. Otherwise... He left the threat hanging, his massive frame coiled like a spring about to release. The veterans recognized what was coming. They'd seen that look before. Not in wrestling rings, but in combat zones where the violence was neither staged nor contained. One touched his service medals again, a gesture of remembrance for battles past and the one about to unfold. Have it your way then, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper as he took his final step forward. Time to show everyone what happens when make-believe meets the mountain. The courtyard had fallen completely silent, the only sound the whisper of wind against ancient stones. In that moment of perfect tension, as Marcus's muscles bunched for his attack, Harrison's eyes shifted, just slightly, to meet the wrestler's gaze. It was the only warning he would give. Marcus lunged forward with explosive power, his massive arms reaching for Harrison's uniform. Time to fly, soldier boy! The wrestler's hands, calloused from years of throwing men around rings, closed on empty air as Harrison pivoted with fluid precision, his movement so subtle it seemed like the larger man had simply missed. Stand still! Marcus snarled, frustration bleeding into his voice as he wheeled around for another grab. This time his fingers brushed the scarlet fabric of Harrison's uniform, only to find himself suddenly off balance, his own momentum being used against him with devastating efficiency. Harrison's response was a masterclass in close-quarter combat. His ceremonial rifle, far from being an encumbrance, became an extension of his body as he used it to create space, deflecting Marcus's grasp with the same precision he'd once employed in combat zones. You little... Marcus's curse was cut short as he charged forward again, this time with the full force of his 300 pounds behind him. He'd used this same rush to crush opponents through ring barriers, to send men to emergency rooms across 3 continents. But Harrison wasn't in a ring, bound by wrestling's rules and restraints. The guard's response was instantaneous. As Marcus committed to his charge, Harrison stepped inside the wrestler's reach. The movement was almost invisible. A subtle shift of weight, a precise application of leverage, and suddenly Marcus's own momentum became his enemy. The courtyard echoes with the sound of the wrestler's surprise as his feet left the ground. Harrison, using principles honed in military combat training, had converted Marcus's forward charge into upward movement. For a surreal moment, the massive wrestler was airborne, his expression changing from rage to disbelief as he realized he'd lost control of the situation. "This isn't possible!" Marcus's protest was cut short as he met the courtyard stones with crushing force. The impact drove the air from his lungs in an explosive grunt. Harrison's takedown had been precise, professional, and devastatingly effective. But Marcus hadn't earned his reputation by staying down. He rolled to his feet with surprising agility for a man his size, rage now replacing his showman's facade. "You're dead!" he roared, launching himself at Harrison with pure animal fury. What followed was a lesson in the difference between staged combat and military efficiency. Harrison's movements were economical, each response calculated to neutralize rather than perform. When Marcus threw a haymaker that would have collapsed a ring post, Harrison slipped the punch and used the wrestler's extended arm as a lever. The veterans watching nodded in grim approval as Harrison executed a perfect arm drag, once again using Marcus's own strength against him. The wrestler's bulk worked against him now, each wild attack met with precise counters that left him increasingly frustrated and off balance. "Fight like a man!" Marcus bellowed, his theatrical presence shattered by genuine fury as another grab attempt was deftly avoided. But Harrison wasn't fighting. He was controlling, containing, each movement designed to neutralize rather than harm. The culmination came as Marcus, abandoning all pretense of technique, simply tried to tackle Harrison with pure power. The guard's response was textbook military hand-to-hand combat. A slight shift of weight, a precise adjustment of stance, and suddenly Marcus's world turned upside down. The takedown was devastating in its simplicity. Harrison used the wrestler's forward momentum to execute a perfect hip throw, adding his own technique to Marcus's charge. The result sent the larger man flying, his bulk working against him as he rotated through the air. Marcus hit the ground with enough force to shake the courtyard stones. This time, there was no quick recovery, no theatrical bounce back. He lay there, gasping, as Harrison resumed his post with the same precision that had marked his defensive movements. You can't," Marcus wheezed, trying to push himself up. His arms trembled, betraying the impact of the fall. "This isn't how it's supposed to." Palace security was already approaching, their pace unhurried. They'd witnessed everything and knew the situation was well in hand. The veterans exchanged knowing looks, their expressions a mixture of satisfaction and professional approval. As Marcus was helped to his feet by his concerned entourage, his legs unsteady beneath him, Harrison stood at attention, exactly as he had before. Perfect posture, eyes forward, the very image of military discipline. The only sign of the confrontation was a slight adjustment of his uniform, executed with the same precision he'd used to neutralize the threat. The wrestler, his showman's swagger replaced by genuine shock, had to be supported by Dave as they retreated. "This isn't over," he managed, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I'll show you all what real—" "Son," the older veteran cut him off, his voice carrying the weight of genuine combat experience. "It was over before it began. You just didn't know it." The setting sun caught Harrison's medals one last time, their gleam a reminder that some battles are won not with theatrical violence but with disciplined precision and controlled power. The guard's stance hadn't changed, his bearing still perfect, while Marcus was helped away, his bulk somehow diminished by the encounter. Palace security converged on Marcus with professional efficiency, their movements precise and coordinated. The wrestler's entourage hung back, Dave nervously clutching the discarded tracksuit jacket as two officers approached their still unsteady boss. "Sir," The lead officer's voice carried practiced authority. "You'll need to come with us." His hand rested casually on his radio, backup already alerted and en route. "Assaulting a Queen's Guard is a serious offence." Marcus, still breathing heavily, tried to summon his ring presence. "Assault? He's the one who—" He cut off, wincing as he tried to straighten to his full height. The impact with the courtyard stones had left its mark, his usual imposing stance compromised by genuine pain. "What we witnessed," the second officer stated firmly, "was a trained serviceman responding to a clear threat with appropriate force." His eyes flickered to the veterans, who stood ready to provide statements if needed. "Multiple witnesses can confirm you initiated the confrontation." Dave stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding. Mr. Morrison is a professional athlete. He was just—" "Just what?" The older veteran's voice cut through the excuse. "Just thought he'd assault a serving member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces. Thought his wrestling credentials gave him the right to attack a guard at his post." His campaign medals caught the fading light as he squared his shoulders. "I served with men like Guard Harrison. The uniform isn't for show, as your boss just learned." Marcus, his pride hurt worse than his body, attempted to pull away from the approaching officers. "Do you know who I am? I've got lawyers that'll—" "We know exactly who you are, sir," the lead officer interrupted. "Marcus the Mountain Morrison, banned from 3 wrestling promotions for excessive violence. And now," he gestured to his partner to begin the formal process, "you can add assaulting a Queen's Guard to your record." The younger veteran stepped forward, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd seen real combat. "You know what your biggest mistake was? Thinking that stand guard duty means standing still. Every man wearing that uniform has proved himself in ways your staged fights couldn't touch." Harrison remained at his post, his bearing perfect, as if the entire incident had been nothing more than a slight break in routine. But the veterans recognized subtle signs, the precise angle of his rifle, the alertness in his stance, that spoke of continued readiness should Marcus try anything else. "This is ridiculous," Marcus protested, as handcuffs were produced. "I'm a professional fighter. I was just—" "You're a performer," the older veteran corrected, who confused choreographed violence with real combat capability. "Guard Harrison is a soldier who's faced actual threats, not staged ones. The difference," he gestured at Marcus's still unsteady stance, "should be clear now." As police reinforcements arrived to take custody of the wrestler, his entourage already providing details for the inevitable paperwork, the sun dipped below the castle walls. The last light caught Harrison's uniform, highlighting medals earned not in entertainment, but in genuine service. Marcus, his bulk diminished by defeat, was led away still protesting, though his threats had lost their thunder. "This isn't over. When my lawyers hear about—" "It was over," the younger veteran remarked to his colleague, "the moment he mistook military discipline for weakness." They watched as the wrestler was escorted to a waiting police vehicle, his claims of legal retaliation fading into the evening air. As the police vehicle carrying Marcus disappeared through the palace gates, the regular rhythm of tourist life began to resume in the courtyard. Guard Harrison stood exactly as he had before the incident, his posture perfect, his discipline unshaken. The only evidence of the confrontation was a scuff mark on the ancient stones where the wrestler had met reality. The veterans lingered a moment longer, their presence adding weight to the lesson just delivered. "You see it often enough," the older one remarked to a nearby family who had witnessed everything. "People confusing discipline with weakness, mistaking ceremonial duty for mere performance." "But these guards," his companion added, touching his own service medals, "they're not actors in a show. Every man wearing this uniform has proven himself where it matters, not in rings or staged battles, but in real combat situations where lives hang in the balance." Harrison's unwavering stance spoke volumes about the true nature of strength, not the showy, aggressive display of dominance that Marcus had attempted, but the controlled power of someone who knows exactly what they're capable of and sees no need to prove it to anyone. The setting sun cast long shadows across the courtyard, but Harrison's shadow remained straight and true. A living reminder that some traditions endure not because they're inflexible, but because they represent timeless values. Discipline, duty, and the quiet strength that comes from serving something greater than oneself. As darkness settled over Windsor Castle, the incident would be recorded in official reports and police statements. But the real record was written in the understanding of those who witnessed it. A clear demonstration that true power isn't found in the ability to impose your will on others, but in the discipline to stand firm in your duty, unmoved until action becomes necessary. What does this encounter teach us about the difference between real strength and mere showmanship? When Marcus Morrison brought his wrestling ring bravado to Windsor Castle, he learned a lesson about the true nature of power, one that had nothing to do with size, strength, or staged victories. Perhaps the most telling moment wasn't the takedown itself, but what came after. Guard Harrison, resuming his post with the same unwavering discipline he'd shown before. No celebration, no boasting. No need to prove anything, just the quiet continuation of duty that has marked the Queen's Guard for centuries. Think about it. How often do we mistake silence for weakness? How many times do we fail to recognize that true strength often stands quietest, ready but unmoving, until duty demands action? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, like this video, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you never miss an update. Share this video with friends who appreciate stories of true strength, and make sure to check out the videos on your end screen right now for more insights into dignity, discipline, and the real meaning of power. Until next time, remember, the greatest strength often resides in silent readiness, upheld by principles and unwavering resolve. We'll see you in the next story.